Hello everyone and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 253. Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team had a pretty damn rotten day today. Not only did Judge Nathan slap down the gag request order, but Judge Preska decided to move ahead and unseal a big tranche of documents in the defamation case between Virginia and Ghislaine Maxwell. So effectively, she got two-pieced up today. Hit with that two-piece combo, disastrous results for her, but a great day for justice and for these girls getting the justice that they deserve. Because, folks, how long has Ghislaine Maxwell and her friends and confidants and co-conspirators, how long have they been provided the protection of the courts with the unseemly deal they received in Florida at the forefront of that? And finally, Ghislaine Maxwell is rotting away in a jail cell. The core four are most certainly being looked at, examined, and I would not be shocked, indicted. And you have all of these other institutions that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell under the microscope. Financial institutions especially. We see with the Deutsche Bank fine and now with the JP Morgan report. The prosecutors are going to go after all of that stuff and tie all of this financial nonsense into this case as a whole, and it is going to balloon. That is most certainly what it appears is going on anyway, as of right now. Because this is going to be much bigger than just Ghislaine Maxwell. And for all of these years, these people thought that they were going to be protected under that ridiculous non-prosecution agreement that they weaseled out for themselves in Florida. They went on with their lives. Everything was all good. Thought that people were going to forget what happened and that they were never ever going to have to answer for what they did. Well, that's all coming to an end. And in these documents that Judge Preska has unsealed, there are going to be some big names coming out, folks. Some names that are going to shock a lot of the unsullied. And by the unsullied, I mean people who have not been following the case very closely and who might be new to the case. Some of these names that are going to come out are going to shock people. I know that when I first started researching this case, and I saw some of the names, people like Glenn Dubin, I was honestly blown away. Because you think, you hear about guys like this, big financial gurus, big time, investors, guys that have the world at their feet. And you don't think they'd be involved in something like this, right? So when I started to hear some of the names, Bill Richardson, George Mitchell, Prince Andrew, I was blown away. And I am sure that these documents are going to put some of that into context and going to explain a little bit more what all of their roles were within what occurred. And I think we're going to see a lot of that come out in these documents when they're finally unsealed. And I think that it's going to shock a lot of people. So let's get to our article. Our article tonight is from the Daily Mail. And the headline is, Epstein Floodgates Open as Judge Rules Explosive Docs Detailing Ghislaine Maxwell's Sex Life Can Be Unsealed in Virginia Roberts Defamation Case Within a Week. Now, obviously, Maxwell's team, they're appealing this ruling. They don't want this stuff unsealed, so they're appealing this ruling, and they're going to go to the Second Court of Appeals and try and get this overturned and keep everything sealed. I don't think that they have a good chance of doing that. Maybe some of the documents, if that's something that the appeals court is willing to do, piecemeal it perhaps. Maybe there's something that they think is bad for her in the criminal portion of the case. But I believe that a majority of these documents, if not all of them, will be not only unsealed by Preska, which that already has occurred, but it will be given the stamp of approval by the appeals court as well, because we've seen stuff like this go to the appeals court already here, and we've seen how they've ruled. So I think that it is highly likely that the appeals court rules in favor of these documents being unsealed. The author of this article is Daniel Bates. A judge today has ordered the unsealing of a vast tranche of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, which could shed light on his friendship with powerful men accused of having sex with his survivors. And again, for those of you who have been following this case, a lot of the names that are going to come out aren't going to shock you. But it's going to be more confirmation of what we already know, right? A little more meat on the bone, put things a little bit more into perspective. We'll actually have the court documents that we can read through ourselves, like always, and come to our own conclusions. So it's going to be very important, those documents in that regard. But again, for people who are not familiar with this case, I think they're in for a very, very big surprise. Judge Loretta Preska said that 80 documents, which will run to hundreds of pages, should be made public within a week. And again, they have time to appeal the ruling, so we'll see how quickly the Second Court of Appeals gets in action and hears the case and makes a decision. We'll see how quick that goes, but it should be within the week. The documents will include depositions from Ghislaine Maxwell, which could explain her alleged role in Epstein's sex trafficking operation. Yeah, 100%. She gave a deposition. She was under, oath, right? That's how she ended up perjuring herself. So she gave these depositions, and it was a very expansive deposition, and it touched on a lot of personal notes. And that was one of their arguments, that it's a personal nature, the deposition. It was never supposed to be made public, etc., etc., etc. So basically, it was embarrassing. Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, when you're accused of the crimes that you are accused of, and you already settled this case out of court, I think that you shouldn't be worried about being embarrassed. You should be more worried about the criminal portion of this case at this point, because the embarrassment train has most certainly left the station. Besides Geraldo Rivera and the President of the United States wishing you well, I don't think there's anybody that I've seen that has come forward as a defender of Ghislaine Maxwell and her behavior. I haven't even heard anything from Laura Goldman, so, there's nobody coming out as a co-signer for Maxwell at this point. They could include details about Maxwell's sex life that her lawyers have previously tried to stop from being released, relating to a 7-hour, 418-page deposition Maxwell gave, which her legal team said was extremely personal and confidential. And again, I just touched on that. I don't really care how embarrassing it is. If you're embarrassed of the things you do behind closed doors, then I don't know what to tell you. You're probably living your life in a pretty shitty, shady way if you're embarrassed about what's going on behind closed doors. Whatever your sexual proclivities are, is there anything that's really not accepted these days? As long as it's between two consenting adults, I really don't think most people give a damn what you do behind closed doors. So I don't want to hear anything about, it's private and it's confidential and extremely personal. What you did to those girls was extremely personal. Well, you don't think they have carried the embarrassment of knowing that this happened to them and that nobody listened to them and carrying that as part of their burden? And all of a sudden we're supposed to worry about your embarrassment because of the proclivities? Sorry, I don't really care if you're embarrassed or not. In filings, Maxwell's lawyers have called the depositions a series of efforts to compel Maxwell to answer intrusive questions about her sex life. It's all relevant. She's charged with sex crimes. So her sex life is highly relevant to the case. It's not like she's been brought in there as a bank robber and they're digging into her sex life. Then I'd be like, all right, well, okay, I could see how that doesn't really make any sense. It has nothing to do with the crime. Fine. But this is all part of it, right? Unfortunately, if you want to abuse children, you want to be part of a sex trafficking ring, you better be prepared to answer some questions when, not if, but when you get caught. Because the days of these people operating in the shadows without us paying attention, thinking they're just stealing from us, which we always found acceptable up until now, well, those days are over. Everybody's paying attention to what these people are doing now. Everybody's paying attention to these sick people and their charities. So they better find a new strategy and they better do it quick because their time is coming. Karma is most certainly coming for all of these people. And with these documents about to come out, you better believe there are some very, very powerful men and women who are not going to have a good night's sleep tonight or any time in the future. The documents will also include communications between Maxwell and Epstein from January 2015, when Virginia Roberts made explosive allegations about them in court papers. And again, she acted like she had no contact with Epstein, like they weren't homies still. It's such BS. You don't need to have a face-to-face this day and age to still be in contact with somebody. All kinds of ways that you can keep in contact with your co-conspirators, right? And that's exactly what they were doing. And we know that there has been emails that have come out between Ghislaine Maxwell and Prince Andrew talking about Virginia. Prince Andrew asking about, I have a few questions about Virginia. And then this smarmy SOB actually thinks that we're not going to question that. Oh yeah, we're not friends anymore. We hardly talk. Please, these people are all ridiculous. In the papers, Roberts claimed she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew 3 times when she was just 17 at Epstein's command. The case is separate from the criminal proceedings against Maxwell, 58, who was accused by federal prosecutors of procuring girls as young as 14 for Epstein to abuse. She has pleaded not guilty and is due to stand trial next year. So we know that court date and the trial's supposed to start on July 12th, 2021. And a lot of people have asked why so long, and it's pretty average for one of these federal cases, honestly. These cases are always drawn out. I mean, look at Keith Raniere and Nexium. We're going on, 2.5 years? He still hasn't been sentenced. And then you have R. Kelly. So maybe Raniere was sentenced recently. I don't know. But it took a while either way. Either it's still ongoing or it took a while. And then you have R. Kelly, same situation. A lot of times what will happen is these sort of cases, even at the mark of a year, is not enough time, especially if they're trying to build a more expansive case that includes other individuals. So you might even see this be extended out more than that. Hopefully not. Hopefully they get everything going. They've had so many years to collect evidence in this case, and they should have all of their ducks in a row if they plan on bringing indictments. And again, we don't know. There might be some sealed indictments right now that are just waiting for the right time for them to unseal them and make other arrests in the case. We just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. The case ruled on Thursday was originally brought by Roberts, now a 36-year-old mother of 3 who lives in Australia and is married. She sued Maxwell in 2015 for defamation because Maxwell accused her of lying. Roberts said in court filings that Maxwell recruited her and other girls into a sex trafficking ring for politically connected and financially powerful people. The case was settled in 2017 for an undisclosed sum, but media organizations sued for documents to the case to be made public. And again, Maxwell and the rest of these pieces of garbage all avoid discovery. None of them want to go to the discovery phase of any of these cases because they know they're going to be laid bare. They know that they are going to be absolutely raked over the coals because now you're in danger of seriously screwing yourself and perjuring yourself and looking at some serious jail time if you lie, and the government can prove that. So discovery is just something that these people try to avoid at all costs. During the hearing at Manhattan's federal court, Judge Preska said Maxwell's right to privacy was outweighed by the need for the documents to become public, and that's for sure. Her rights to privacy were basically waived when she got involved with Epstein's criminal trafficking ring, when she helped him facilitate it, when she was in a leadership role. Her rights to privacy are gone. She's a public figure, and that's just basically the end of it, right? These documents should be all released to the public in a transparent manner so we can see how our tax dollars are being spent. She went through the dozens of documents which included Robert's depositions and various dull-sounding legal papers. The contents, however, could be explosive and may contain fresh evidence against the wealthy elite who socialized with Epstein. And again, I don't know how much more evidence we're going to get from this first batch, this first tranche, but for the people who are unsullied, well, they're going to be in for a big surprise. And again, I'm not saying we won't be, because who knows? I have no idea what is in these documents. Again, like I always tell you, I have no inside information here. I have no idea. Speculation and reading between the lines, that's how we've put this puzzle together. We haven't had the benefit of some inside source in the courtroom or, somebody in the know like that at all. But when you look at what's going on here, it's very possible that there might be some information that we are not privy to yet, some stuff that we do not know. So I expect for us to have a few shocks of our own. Now, how large those shocks will be, that remains to be seen. After the ruling, Maxwell's lawyer, Laura Menninger, asked for a 2-week delay in the unsealing so they could file an appeal in the Second Circuit in New York. Menninger said, "There have been some significant changes with respect to my client's positions, and perhaps known to everyone listening to this, while we were speaking about a potential ongoing criminal investigation before, since that time, Miss Maxwell has been indicted and a trial has been scheduled." And remember, when we were talking about this weeks ago, and Preska decided to delay the hearing because of the criminal case, that was a big tell that more was coming down the pipe. And we talked about it right away, that it was one of the things going on behind the scenes and the rumbles that we were hearing that pointed to something much bigger occurring. Because Preska probably, again, speculation on my part here, Preska probably reached out to Judge Allison Nathan or to whoever was in charge of the indictments, the sealed indictments, about Maxwell's status and asked if delaying the hearing would be a good idea, blah, blah, blah. Basically to get their ducks in a row. And once she heard that there was going to be an indictment coming down, I'm sure that helped steer Preska's decision to delay the hearing for a little bit longer. Again, speculation on my part. Certainly not a lawyer, and I don't have any idea really how their brains work when it comes to stuff like this, but it does make sense that they would be in coordination, right? Both federal judges, I'm sure they know each other, I'm sure their clerks know each other, so it would make sense that they coordinated when Preska made the original move to delay. And those are the kind of things that I look for when I talk about reading in between the lines here in this case, right? We look for those little things and we put the pieces together from all of these articles we read, and it reveals a bigger picture, right? A bigger part of the puzzle. Now we're in a vastly different position and have grave concerns about our client's ability to receive a fair trial given the intense media scrutiny around anything that is unsealed. And look, I agree with her in the sense of she should be worried. This is a big, big shot to the gut for Ghislaine Maxwell and her defense team. With this stuff getting unsealed, as long as the second Court of Appeals doesn't get in the way and this stuff gets released, it's going to be explosive. And it's just going to ignite more fires and have more people taking a closer look at what really occurred here. And once people do that, it's inevitable that it does not take long for them to understand that this is not a conspiracy theory, not what we're talking about here on this podcast, elsewhere perhaps, but here on this podcast, this is not a conspiracy theory we're discussing. This is a vast intercontinental cover-up. And we've seen it form right before our eyes with all of the articles we've read and all of the information that we've gone through. And we're seeing now the players that we've been talking about for so long, well, they're starting to have to face time under the microscope, right? It's their time to answer some questions finally. Robert's lawyer, Sigrid McCauley, said she wanted the documents made public as swiftly as possible. Judge Preska said if the Second Circuit had not ruled within a week, then the files should be made public. And that's an important ruling right there too, folks, because if they can't fit it in, if the Second Court has other things going on, the Second Court of Appeals, and they can't fit this ruling in within a week, then it looks like Preska is willing to move forward with her own ruling, certify it, and dump the documents. So we're coming upon some very interesting times. I would say a week from today, Thursday, is the latest we will see these documents. They will be out on Thursday, maybe sooner, depending on what the Second Court says, the Second Court of Appeals. So very interesting stuff going on, folks. The lawsuit to release the documents was originally filed by Miami Herald and their reporter Julie Brown, whose series on Epstein called Perversion of Justice in 2018 put renewed focus on the case and led to his arrest last July. As a result, there are thousands of pages of documents which are being released on a rolling basis. And that's what Preska ruled originally, right? That she was going to release these documents on a rolling basis. I had no idea that we'd be here so early and with so many documents ready to go. And again, a lot of them might just be run-of-the-mill legal papers like they said, but there will be some gems in here. I am almost sure of that. Each time a person's name comes up, they are notified and given the chance to make objections to their name becoming public. There were 2 John Does in the latest batch, but they did not make any complaints when approached to make any comments according to court filings. That is pretty interesting because previously the John Doe was going crazy, right? Didn't want his name released, blah, blah, blah. I think that we're at a point where the cat's out of the bag and John Doe understands what's coming down the pipe. And it's a fruitless and pointless effort on his part to try and fight his name coming to light. Now it's time to dig in and worry about how to defend the allegations as opposed to trying to avoid them. Because it's accelerating right before our eyes. Everything is accelerating and moving in the right direction. Some big victories this week, right? Some very big victories. And things are moving at a very fast clip. So whoever these John Does are, I think they understand what's going on and they've reevaluated their strategy and they're going to dig in now. The Second Circuit had already ordered 2,000 pages of documents to be made public, and they were released last August, the day before Epstein killed himself. This is what I was talking about earlier, so they already have precedent of releasing these documents, right? So it shouldn't be a hard decision for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals to come to the conclusion that this stuff should be released, especially when they can point to precedent in a case connected. That's a big deal for them. They love precedent. They'll sit around and they'll argue that kind of shit forever, these judges. But this seems to be pretty clear, cut, and dry, in my opinion. The document included the unpublished manuscript of a memoir from Epstein survivor Virginia Roberts, which detailed her years of abuse by him. There were depositions from Epstein's pilots, his former associates, and flight logs showing him traveling the globe with the survivors and famous people such as Bill Clinton. And the time for Bill Clinton to hide in the shadows is over as well, folks. This man has avoided scrutiny for far too long. And I have a funny feeling that his name is going to be all over these papers that are coming out. And he's going to have to answer hard questions about his 26 or so flights on the plane. He's going to have to answer those questions at some point, and answer why he lied and said he was never in New Mexico, and why he lied about being at the other properties as well. He needs to answer for that stuff. Among those who have taken an interest in the defamation case are lawyers for a John Doe who appears to be somebody who will be featured in the documents. His identity is unclear, but the powerful men who have been accused of involvement with Epstein include former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Now, I wonder why they would add that name in there. Could it be Ehud Barak who is mentioned in these documents? Very well could be. And this could be, Chekhov's gun, right? They're loading the gun and putting it on the shelf here in Chapter 1. So when these documents drop in Chapter 12, well, you can use the gun that was already loaded, right? So that could be what's going on here, and the Daily Mail might have an inside track on some of the names. Very possible, I don't know. Or it could just be a name that they decided to randomly throw in here because it's somebody who was high profile and who was involved. On the same day, Maxwell was dealt another blow when the judge overseeing her criminal case refused her request to gag the FBI, prosecutors, and survivors' lawyers. Judge Allison Nathan said Maxwell could still get a fair trial, but warned she would not hesitate to take appropriate action if anyone stepped out of line. I don't think anyone has really stepped out of line in this case. You know, even the survivors themselves are pretty reserved about what they talk about for the most part. And I think that Ghislaine Maxwell threw a Hail Mary here. Her team threw a Hail Mary here. And they understood that they weren't going to get this gag order, but it was something that they thought they had to try. Maxwell's lawyers had claimed that comments by the prosecutors and survivors' lawyers meant that a jury could be prejudiced against her. Attorneys for Jeffrey Epstein's alleged madam, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, all-around scuzzball, objected to the FBI referring to her as a slithering snake at a press conference announcing her arrest on July 2nd. Well, she is a slithering snake. Perfect term for her. That's exactly what she is. A bipedal serpent. The letter from Maxwell's lawyers, which was filed on Tuesday, said, "We write to request the court enter an order prohibiting the government, its agents and counsel, for witnesses from making extrajudicial statements concerning this case. Although Miss Maxwell is presumed innocent, the government, its agents, witnesses, and their lawyers have made and continue to make statements prejudicial to a fair trial. A defendant must be judged by a jury of her peers based on evidence presented at trial, not in the media." Well, that's kind of ridiculous, especially this day and age. Everything's going to be discussed. It's no different from back in the day before the internet was around. I'm old enough to remember before the internet was around, and people stood around at the water cooler shooting the shit talking about what was in the news. That's what we do on the internet now. That's basically what we do on a podcast like this, and it's just a larger forum, right? More people involved. Maxwell's lawyer, Jeff Pagliuca, outlined 7 wide-ranging categories which prosecutors, the FBI, and survivors' lawyers should be banned from talking about. This included the character or reputation of the accused and any opinion as the accused's guilt or innocence, or as the merits of the case or evidence in the case. Yeah, that was never going to fly. Basically, he wants everybody to shut up. People who have been shut up for their whole lives, who have been told to keep quiet for their whole lives, he wanted to keep them quiet for a little bit longer. Again, I don't believe that's going to occur. I don't believe it's acceptable at this point, and I don't think that anybody that's involved in the case would accept it. So that definitely wasn't going to fly. Pagliuca wrote, because plain vanilla surrenders lacked the fanfare and attendant media coverage afforded to secret, armed raids at dawn, the government chose to invade Miss Maxwell's New Hampshire residence, arrest her, and stage a media presentation that included numerous statements that prejudiced Miss Maxwell's right to a fair trial. Oh, give me a break. Not a mugshot, no camera team there to watch her get arrested, none of that shit. So please, save it. The letter strongly objected to comments by Audrey Strauss, the top federal prosecutor overseeing her case, that Maxwell lied because the truth was almost unspeakable. Yeah, well, that is the going premise here, right? That is what everybody is going on. That Maxwell is a liar, and she is accused of some very heinous crimes by many people. So yeah, people are going to think that what she has done and the lies that she is allegedly had told here are beyond speaking, because they are. It's horrendous what she was involved in. Pagliuca complained about FBI Special Agent William Sweeney calling Maxwell a villain who has slithered away to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire. The letter said, thus, Mr. Sweeney offers the government's, again flatly wrong, opinions about character and guilt while, at the same time, invoking a semi-biblical reference involving a snake slithering away to a garden in New Hampshire. Look, her defense team is grasping at straws at this point, folks. They really don't have any sort of tenable position. Everything that they have is just not good enough. She does not have the evidence that she's going to need to get off on these charges. Just the circumstantial evidence alone is enough to really have her in big trouble, right? Because if there's that much circumstantial evidence, you know that behind the scenes there is piles of tangible, usable evidence that these prosecutors are going to break out and drop directly on Ghislaine Maxwell and her defense team. Because there's no going back for her at this point. She has made her bed, and now, while she's in her prison-issued clothing, she must lie in that bed. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that pertain to this episode can be found in the description box. And to everybody who has donated to the podcast via the GoFundMe account, thank you very much. All right, everybody, we'll be back tomorrow, and we're going to do it all over again.